Civil law operates on a strict timeline. A natural person's legal existence begins at the moment of a live birth and ends with absolute finality at the moment of biological death. Article 42 of the Civil Code makes this boundary explicit. Death extinguishes civil personality. The immediate consequence is that a natural person's capacity to act drops to zero. They can no longer sign contracts, they cannot own property, or exercise any legal rights. Yet human beings rarely die with completely neatly resolved affairs. They leave behind complex wealth, including executory contracts, pending investments, and active business applications. Here, the law encounters a severe timing mismatch. Biological death is instantaneous. The legal process of succession, identifying heirs, clearing debts, and paying taxes, is a slow, highly regulated bureaucratic process that can take years. This creates an immediate operational crisis. Without a legally recognized entity to hold and manage these active assets during the transition, they risk arbitrary forfeiture, devaluation, or total destruction. Because the law abhors a vacuum, the courts must manufacture a temporary legal bridge to hold these rights between the exact moment of biological death and the final determination of the rightful heirs. A clear example of this biological timeline failing in practice occurred in 1946, involving a businessman named Pedro Fragrante. Fragrante had an active application pending before the Public Service Commission for a Certificate of Public Convenience. A Certificate of Public Convenience is a government-issued franchise, legally required to operate a public utility. The proposed public utility was substantial, a 2.5-ton ice plant located in San Juan, Rizal. Fragrante had already committed 35,000 pesos in capital to the plant, a massive financial stake for the era. Then, the inciting incident strikes. Pedro Fragrante dies while his application is still actively pending before the commission. Instead of dismissing the case, the commission made an unusual procedural move. They granted the public utility franchise not to a living person, but directly to Fragrante's intestate estate. An intestate estate is the legal status assigned to the property left by someone who dies without a valid will. This decision immediately triggered a formal legal opposition from a competitor, Angel Limjoco. Limjoco grounded his argument in strict civil biology. He argued that an estate is merely a pile of dead assets, completely devoid of the legal personhood required to hold a government franchise. The Supreme Court now faced a clear dilemma. They had to either validate Limjoco's strict biological technicality, thereby destroying a 35,000 peso investment, or invent a legal fiction to save the enterprise. To resolve the crisis, the court had to deconstruct the concept of personhood. In civil law, a person is strictly defined as any entity capable of holding legal rights and obligations. The primary category is the natural person, which absolutely requires biological human life. The secondary category is the juridical person, which exists entirely by legal construction, independent of biology. Standard examples of juridical persons include corporations, partnerships, and the state itself. This ontology tree maps the legal taxonomy. It splits into natural and juridical entities, with the court radically branching the estate under the juridical category. Citing Billings v. State, the estate is defined as a property collection legally attributed with rights and duties. This artificial personhood carries direct procedural utility. It allows a court-appointed judicial administrator to step in and act as the legal brain, managing the mass of property on behalf of the deceased. The court actively manufactured this artificial personhood to serve as a temporary legal vessel, preventing a total failure of justice during the administrative gap. Establishing the estate as a juridical person creates the next logical hurdle. Even if the estate can legally hold rights, it cannot inherit every single right originally possessed by the deceased. The law applies a strict filter. First, there is the category of rights that are immediately extinguished by biological death. These include criminal liability, marital status, and strictly personal obligations, like a contract to paint a portrait. Opposing this is the category of rights that inherently survive biological death. These survivable rights include real property ownership, financial debts, and executory business contracts. The court had to analyze Fragrante's specific application for the ice plant franchise against these two strict categories. They reasoned that the right to prosecute the franchise application was not a strictly personal attribute of Fragrante himself, but a survivable property right inextricably tied to his 35,000 peso capital investment. Because the franchise application represented a tangible economic asset, it successfully bypassed the filter of biological death and vested safely into the estate. With the estate recognized as a person capable of holding the property right, the court faced one final absolute statutory roadblock, Section 16 of the Public Service Act. This law enforces strict national protectionism over public utilities. The statutory language is categorical. It limits the granting of public utility franchises exclusively to citizens of the Philippines. Limjoco deployed his strongest logical argument here. An abstract artificial entity like an estate cannot hold a passport, it cannot be born, and it inherently lacks a nationality. This conceptual visualization maps the Supreme Court's aggressive conceptual workaround. As Pedro Fragrante's biological timeline ends, his citizenship status detaches and bridges over to the newly formed estate entity. The court proved this logically through the doctrine of extended citizenship. If the law already utilizes a fiction to extend personality so the deceased's debts are paid, it must logically extend citizenship to protect the deceased's pending franchise. Denying this extension would unjustly penalize Fragrante's surviving creditors and heirs, triggering the total loss of the 35,000 peso investment. As a safeguard against foreign abuse, the citizenship status passes through the estate and rests on the undetermined heirs with a conditional checkmark. This extension operates as a rebuttable presumption. If the heirs are later identified and proven to be aliens, the state retains full power to revoke the franchise or enjoy them from inheriting. The court weaponized a legal fiction to uphold the economic intent of the Constitution, refusing to let strict biological formalism paralyze commercial reality. The philosophical core of this ruling is best articulated in the concurring opinion of the case. It clarifies that the estate is never intended to be a permanent destination for wealth. It is strictly a temporary, representative device. This structural visualization captures the court's exact metaphor. The estate operates as a liquid condition in process of solidification. We see the pooled, unassigned assets, the franchise and the capital, contained within the estate, which then structurally divide and solidify into discrete property shares. The liquid state represents the chaotic administrative period. This is the time spent actively identifying legal heirs, clearing outstanding debts, and paying estate taxes. Solidification happens at the exact moment judicial administration concludes, and the assets vest directly into the hands of the identified natural heirs. For legal practitioners managing complex successions, the Limjoco Doctrine provides the essential framework for keeping businesses operational during probate. Juridical capacity is not a static biological absolute. It is a dynamic, engineered construct used by the courts to ensure the uninterrupted flow of human enterprise across the boundary of death.